Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good evening, respected faculty members, moderators, anchors, and dear participants. I'm sure everybody is safe and healthy. Myself, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar. I'm the President, Academy of Pediatrics, Uttar Pradesh. I feel proud in welcoming you all to this ambitious program of UPIAP. I thank Dr. Vineet Saxena and Dr. Shalabh Kumar for taking this project as a challenge. Thanks our UPIAP Secretary, Dr. Om Chaurasia, who is unfortunately not here till now. As we all know that we are at present passing through a depressing phase of corona pandemic. To bring ourselves out of this phase and to keep us active and updated, we plan to start some activities online.
हेलो
We have renowned experts in every field in our
विनय जी,
state.
डॉक्टर ओमशंकर चौरसिया बोल रहा हूँ। ये मेरे तो डायरेक्ट शुरू हो जा रहा है, मैं लॉगिन कहाँ से करूँ इसको?
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Sanjeev. Continue.
Yeah. We have renowned experts in every field in our state. So we have planned to stick to our state only as far as the faculty is concerned. We should utilize their expertise in this field also. This neonatal ventilation workshop is first of them. I'm sure this workshop will benefit all of us, and we will be in a better frame of mind in managing our NICUs. All the best to the participants. And I request our dynamic national president, Bakul Bhai, Dr. Bakul Parikh sir, to bless us and say a few words. Bakul Bhai.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Sanjeev and Dr.
Yes.
Vineet Saxena for giving me this honor and inviting me on this platform of UPIAP. I am very happy to see you all in a very pleasant mood, and I understand that first breath of a child in first 1 minute in a newborn is very important for his future. And almost all babies, they survive very nicely, but 1% of the baby who requires ventilation also is very important. And to understand these basics, I think this workshop, which is going to be there for 6 days from today, is going to be very useful. I have been interacting with Dr. Vijay about this workshop in past, and I know that this is a very well-structured module and is going to be very useful to each one of you. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the deliberations. Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Om, you want to say something?
No, now, Mr. Vinay would like to elaborate some of the operational aspects.
Can we talk about the module, sir, first?
Module, Dr. Sanjeev, you will tell about the module.
Yeah, I'm telling about the module. We have got 6 days of training program, and every day is anchored by 2 persons and a moderator. And today we have a lecture by Professor Girish Gupta from SGPGI. The topic is decision making in respiratory support. And on 12th of May, we have got 2 lectures. The first is optimizing oxygen therapy in neonates and HHF NNC, Dr. Akash Pandita from SGPGI. And practical concepts of CPAP in neonates by Dr. Akanksha Verma from SGPGI.
सर आपका
Then
माइक थोड़ा आपके चेहरे के पास लिया है ना, थोड़ा सा डिस्टर्बेंस है.
अच्छा.
हाँ, अभी ठीक.
And on 13th, we have got AVG analysis in neonatal ventilation. Professor SN Singh from KGMU, and non-invasive ventilation and high-frequency ventilation by Dr. Anita Singh from SGPGI. Then on 14th, we have got basics of neonatal ventilation, terminology and modes, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Professor, IMS BHU, and initiation of ventilation and monitoring of ventilated baby by Dr. Kirti M. Naranje, SGPGI. On 15th, we have sudden deterioration of a ventilated baby, problems and solution, Dr. Amit Upadhyay from Meerut. And care of ventilated baby and SOPs for ventilation, Professor Ashish Prakash from ex-HOD Subharti Medical College. On 16th, we have got keys to successful weaning by Dr. Premashish Majumdar from Agra, and lesser topics in ventilation by Professor Girish Gupta from SPGI. This is the whole module of 6 days. I'm sure everyone will be benefited, and they are so interesting, and they'll be beneficial to all. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so before we go into some of the operational features, I just wanted to speak about who we are and why we are doing this. My name is Vinay, and I take care of an organization called DREV. And DREV is basically a non-profit organization, and we have been working in India for the past 7 to 8 years. We started on a neonatal jaundice program in 2017 in the state of UP, and one of the things what we understood while working in the periphery areas in UP was that the phototherapy, the best practices around phototherapy was one of the challenges, but also the confidence of doctors in treating the comorbidities was also a challenge. So we thought of building an ecosystem around the usage of a device, and that's how we started this program in 2017. And DREV's mission has always been to improve newborn health outcomes in India, regardless where the kid is born. And this initiative is totally launched to reduce referrals and increase the number of newborns treated near the place they are actually born at. ECHO, who is our partner, also has similar mission. They have a very unique collaborative model of medical education and care management that empowers clinicians everywhere to provide better care to more people right where they live. So some of the things which everyone is a little bit of anxious about since some time in India is about Zoom security. I just wanted to ensure everyone that this is the line we are using is a licensed one and it's very secured. That's why we have asked everyone to register for this program and provided a unique ID so that whenever you join, we know who you are from your unique ID. If you have still not registered, you can message me or Piyush on the group, and we will be able to help you to register. As I said, I've been telling number of times, please rename yourself as your first name and your unique ID so that we know, and we'll also be able to track your attendance. Everyone by default will be on mute. Only I can unmute people who have to speak. That is done so that there is less noise. Everyone is at home, so we want to protect your privacy as well as reduce the noise around the session, and you'll be able to hear better. And no one will be able to share the screen. This is also to improve the security so that no explicit content is shared by anyone. We will allow only one person to share the screen, and that will be the person who is actually taking the session. These are some of the screenshots which I have shared on the WhatsApp group. Also, if you are not able to hear, these are two options you can use. If you want to rename yourself, click on participant, go on your name, click on it. It will tell you the rename option and rename yourself in the way which I have already told. Some of the best practices we want to ensure all the time. Please move into a place where you have steady internet connection so that you can hear everything properly. If you have any questions regarding the session, because we will take questions with every faculty who is actually giving a session here at the end of their lecture, please send those questions to me. My name is Vinay Joshi. You will find it. You will be able to send me a message. You can send only messages to the admin to protect the sanctity of the group. Send your questions or comments to me directly. I will make sure that the moderators, it is passed on to moderator, and they will take the questions at the end of the session. Very important thing, this is a judgment-free zone, and it is all teach, all learn. Everyone here is a doctor, so please, if you do not agree to some point of views of the faculty, please be respectful about it. Everyone has their own way to manage babies, and this is a new way. This is the way. This is the best practice. What we are trying to bring to you. Okay, Dr. Piali. 1 second. Let me unmute you. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Piali is the immediate past president of UP IAP. Dr. Piali, ma'am.
Yes, of course. Instruction for participants. Every session will have a pre-session and post-session quiz. it is mandatory to reply to those quiz questions. Now, quiz will be a multiple choice question and will consist of not more than 2 questions. So this is going to help you learn better. Please join 15 minutes before the session starts, because we will start at 8:30 p.m. every day. You will miss the session if you are late. At the end of the module, that is on May 16, you will receive another evaluation form, which is compulsory to fill for certificate from Academy of Pediatrics, Uttar Pradesh. Attendance per session has to be minimum 75% of the time, and you need to attend at least 8 out of the 11 to qualify for a certificate. So you can't run away, remember. Good attendance will also ensure that you will get maximum learning from the course. The next slide, please. So today's agenda is introduction of our subject matter expert, Dr. Girish Gupta. Topic is decision making in respiratory support. The question answers will be moderated by Dr. Vineet Saxena. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Shalabh. I'm the president-elect of UPIAP. As you all know that we are all passing through the testing times. Whatever is happening was never ever imagined, but contained in every adversity are the seeds of opportunities. Though we are locked down, but we are definitely not knocked down. The spirit of continuous learning binds us together. Only the methods has changed. The e-learning method, which was knocking at the doors for quite some time now, has barged into our homes and has converted our bedrooms into our classrooms. Lockdown will go one day, but e-learning is here to stay. With Central IAP, under the dynamic leadership of Dr. Bakul Parikh and our secretary, Dr. Basavraj, has showed us the way with a tsunami of academics. And we thought that our state should also do something, some activity, which is not only beneficial to our members, but also utilizes the services of our highly accomplished faculties members. There is no greater joy when like-minded people join together and make a team to achieve a noble goal. That's what happened when Dr. Vineet took the initiative, and with the president, Dr. Sanjeev, and myself, we could put together such a nice program within a week's time. And Dr. Vineet, I'm going to hand over. He has been the National Vice President of IAP 2018, President of IAP UP 2017, and Secretary UP IAP 2000 from 7 to 11. And he's held various posts, and he's been the National Executive Board member practicing neurology pediatrics for 24 years. What to say about him? He is an asset for not only for our state IAP, but for the national IAP. And as you know, there's so much flood of webinars. He is the man who conceptualized how to make this program different from any usual webinar to a converted into a training program. And from the wealth of his experience from the NRP program, which has brought the concept of making sure that the participants not only get benefited, but by a concept of pre and post test, they keep them on toes, and not only the participants, but also the faculty, so that they are also tested. So with these words, I hand over to, without any wasting time, to proceed.
Thank you, Shalabh. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you, Shalabh. About a week back, when me, Shalabh, and Sanjeev discussed about this program, we were under tremendous pressure. There are lot of stuff in the webinar, this WhatsApp group, acute webinar syndrome, acute webinitis, like that. So we are little shaky that our program will be successful or not. But friends, we are really overwhelmed with your response. More than 300 persons have already registered. Today we have attendance of 250 people on this digital platform. So number of participants are beyond our expectation all over the UP, from a small town like Siddharth Nagar, Shravasti, Shamli, to big mall city, Noida and Ghaziabad. People are here. From east to west, Nepal border, Mau, Bahraich, Basti, to Delhi and Haryana border, Noida, Ghaziabad, from central UP, some south UP, some from east UP, everybody is participating now. Not only UP, we have crossed boundary of UP. Many our friends are from Uttarakhand are here, from Haryana, and farthest state, Manipur. Dr. Sandeep Kharbinas is here. Dr. Sandeep. One more fellow, Dr. Abhishek from UK, is also participating in this program. Dr. Abhishek, Dr. Sandeep. Friends, it is a really matter of encouragement for me that very senior people like person like Dr. Girish, past president of IAPs, joining this group as a participant. Dr. Girish and Dr. Dheeraj Mohan Gupta, our dynamic past secretary. So thanks to all my senior colleagues for their encouragement and support. So as far as today's topic is concerned, basically, first lecture which Dr. Girish Gupta is going to take is to understand basic physiology of respiration. Whenever any person see a newborn, what we look for is clinical condition. Baby is grunting, subcostal retraction. Then we go for his pulse oximetry. We observe his work of breathing. Then go for their blood gases. But decision in practically, many decisions you took on your experience and your personal practice. But right time and right decision is really important to save a newborn. So with this philosophy, with this lesson, I am inviting Dr. Girish Gupta. Dr. Girish Gupta is really a pride for UP. His native place is Aligarh. He did his MBBS from Jawaharlal Nehru Medical College, Aligarh. Then Dr. Gupta joined Armed Forces. During his Armed Force services, he did his DCH from Meerut Medical College, and in the same time, he passed his DNB. At that, in 90s or late 80s, passing DNB was really very tough. Then Dr. Girish Gupta did his DM Neonatology from prestigious PGI Chandigarh. He got fellowship of National Neonatology Forum. In Armed Forces, he graced the chair of Rear Admiral, that is equal to Major General of Army. He was crowned with Nausena Medal and Vishisht Seva, VSM, Vishisht Seva Medal, given to very distinguished people. On academic front, Dr. Girish Gupta contributed 18 chapters of neonatology. He wrote 2 books on neonatology. About 125 research papers he published. He have 40 new innovation in neonatology. He is a DM and PhD examiner for various universities. On MCI, he is expert on DM and expert for course commencement. So I met Dr. Girish in a Bombay IAP meeting. So sir ने उस समय मेरे से कहा अब फौज छोड़ रहा हूँ और मुझे कुछ मेरे पास ऑफर कॉर्पोरेट के हैं लेकिन मुझे कोई आश्रम जैसी जगह चाहिए. तो आश्रम सर को SGPGI मिला. He joined SGPGI and actually created a department of neonatology there, and DM course, first DM course in UP is now started in SGPGI. So it is my proud privilege to welcome Dr. Girish Gupta sir. Welcome sir.
Thank you. Hello sir. I will just stop share.
Give me the screen.
Yes, now you can share your screen.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
Am I audible all right? Yeah.
Yes.
Very good evening, dear friends and senior people. I am touched by the degree of involvement of people at all levels, starting from ground level, the remotest part of the UP, and the topmost level, the President Central IAP. I am touched. I am indebted to each one of you. In fact, I was a bit depressed because of tsunami, but after listening all this and the responsibility which has been offered to me, my josh has gone up. And I hope the audience is also having a good josh. Our endeavor would be that we would like to give a professional energies so that we all become most competent in that part of the country which people see that it is not doing well. We want to assure the country and the UPIAP that UP neonatology and pediatrics is on the right path. We need blessings of Almighty and involvement of you all, and we'll ensure the future of our babies and children is on the right track. With these starting words, let me come to the topic. That's the dynamics of decision making of respiratory support in neonates. I was wondering that should I talk this topic or something else, but then my reasons of selecting this topic are that I felt that it is extremely and universally relevant. If we understand this, then possibly the entire respiratory care in newborn would become exceedingly easy, and it should be a mission of each one of us that we should make each breath of a neonate very, very comfortable. And last but not the least, to create positive energy in newborn care providers. What I will not cover is the specific respiratory support details. My basic aim today is to give concept, to generate interest, and if we see interest coming up, we'll dwell on more topics based on the need created, and we might have that our organizers could lead us a further platform so that we answer all the questions which possibly may remain unanswered in today's session or the entire 6-day session. However, we will be very excited if last day we are given all the questions which remain unanswered. We will try to do justice to those questions. During this talk, I would put my endeavor to give concept of anatomy, physiology, how the disease is produced in newborn, but most importantly, to create a clinical neonatologist, because that is our strength. So importance of clinical science, investigations, and since it is a decision making, how to manage hypoxia, hypercarpia, and we'll have some carry home message at the end. So basically this entire talk is not on details, but on a concept building. And hence we would like that each doctor in UP or all delegates who are attending this talk should think about each case and then write a prescription, not that what is written in the book on guidelines. Now, this is my most fundamental slide. I'll spend some time. Please pay attention. The first important organ which is responsible for respiration is the brain. It's a it's a driver. So the respiratory rate comes from the brain. Then we must look at the diaphragm. That the effector organ for the respiration is the diaphragm and the respiratory muscles. So when brain gives order, the diaphragm must do its adequate job along with other respiratory muscles. And if it does good job, then the lungs come into operation. Lungs do ventilation. And there are various parts of the respiratory system. The upper part is airway and the lower part is lung parenchyma. I'll dwell a little later, but here I would like to mention that please remember diaphragm is important. When we go further in detail at the microscopic level, because the fundamental action of the lung is to provide gaseous exchange environment, and this happens in the alveoli at the alveocapillary membrane. So it is important that we must maintain its health. The perfusion in the capillaries is exceedingly important. If the pulmonary perfusion is not okay, the gas exchange will not take place. Or if there's a shock or congenital heart disease, again the gas exchange will not take place adequately. Thereafter, we must remember that once the oxygen has gone from the lungs to the blood vessel, how is it carried? Now, the oxygen is carried in the blood in two forms. One is it is bound to RBC as oxyhemoglobin, and there is some dissolved oxygen in the plasma, which is actually gives rise to partial pressure of oxygen, PaO2. But that's a very small amount, and that I will tell you later that why it is important. Then we must understand that all this is happening, the entire process so far has happened just for one function, and that is at a cellular level, the cell and the mitochondria should be able to metabolize the nutrients and produce maximum energy, means ATP. In other words, the entire respiratory exercise is just meant for a singular function, that the cell must produce adequate ATP. This ATP number is much lesser if we have anaerobic metabolism. It is maybe something about 3-4, but if it is aerobic metabolism, then it may be 30 plus. So remember that entire process of respiration is just for having a cellular respiration and generating adequate energy. Now I'll tell you something more about the lung in particular. So when we look at the lungs, so the respiratory system, we have the upper part of the respiratory system, which is airway, and the lower part is parenchyma, and the layers covering it means pleura and the chest wall. So airways are important for conducting the gases, and if there is an obstruction in this, we call it obstructive disease. And remember, the fundamental which I would like to give here is that suppose there is an obstruction in any path, then it is better not to cross this obstruction many times, but take one deep breath. In other words, when there is an obstructive disease or when we want to give a support, we would like to give a more tidal volume or a deeper respiration rather than a faster respiratory rate. Now look at the parenchymal disease, which is a restrictive disease. For example, hyaline membrane disease, pneumonias. Now again, remember the concept here that here lungs are not ready to inflate. So therefore it is easy to breathe many number of times, faster breathing rather than trying to inflate. So maybe a respiratory rate faster would be easier than the tidal volume, or we have to address the tidal volume differently. The third group of condition is a combination of that. There's a mixed disorder where you have airway problem as well as parenchymal problem. The commonest is aspiration syndromes or meconium aspiration syndrome, and there we customize things as per the existing physiology in that baby. So this should be very clear at this level that we have 3 types of diseases, though there could be combination. So therefore, the fundamental which I would like to give here is that the entire process of respiration is just to give aerobic cellular metabolism and hence produce more than 30 ATP per glucose molecule. And if they are not produced, if it is anaerobic, then be ready to manage lactic acidosis. Now I come to a clinical aspect, and that is importance of physical science. You have read, you have seen large number of clinical science, but today I would like to emphasize the importance of this and why we should pay attention to them. Now I start from retractions. Now why retractions occur? They occur because when the lungs are poorly compliant, they fail to inflate. So if they're not inflating, what would happen? There'll be more negative intrapleural pressure. Body would try to make them inflated, but they still do not exceed. So what happens when there is a more negative intrapleural pressure? The chest wall, which is not as strong, it gets sucked in. It means that retraction will produce. And therefore, more the retractions, more severity of the retractions, more distribution of the retraction, it means you have a severe disease or a diffuse disease. This is one of the fundamental signs, retractions. We must watch very closely. Now, the second sign which I would like to address is grunting. Grunting means when the baby is breathing with partially closed glottis, the air is being flowing through that narrow opening, and hence there is a sound produced, that's a grunt. But the functional aspect is that it is not permitting entire air to get out. It means body is trying to retain gas inside. In other words, this is like body is trying to produce CPAP on its own. So it is body's CPAP. So whenever lungs are highly non-compliant, then body would produce grunt. Remember that early grunt is the time when we intervene. But if we allow grunt to increase, it means the disease is becoming severe. Means if you have a hyaline membrane disease, early grunt act. Now, if baby is more grunting, it means baby is producing more CPAP. But remember, though a baby may be grunting more at that time, but if baby is premature, he is going to soon get exhausted and will stop grunting. It's a very bad sign. The third sign which I would like to explain is flaring of Alli-Nasi. Now remember that the largest component of the airway resistance comes from the upper airway and nose in particular, maybe 60 to 80%. Now when there's a resistive disease or obstructive disease, body tries to reduce resistance by dilating the nose, nostrils by flaring of Alli-Nasi. So it's body's defensive mechanism, tachypnea. Now ultimate aim of the ventilation is a minute ventilation, means breathing faster or respiratory rate and the tidal volume. So body tries to breathe faster, tachypnea, to ensure that there is enough ventilation taking place. I put lastly here oxygen saturation. It is the most important sign to have a complete evaluation of cardiorespiratory disease in newborn. It is a topic in itself. Suffices me to state here that oxygen saturation should be taken as one of the clinical signs, not as an observation of an equipment. Once you describe various vital signs, heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, one should say saturation. And what we tell in addition is a capillary refill time. So please remember, these signs are very, very important. As far as I'm concerned, I would like to take a decision of respiratory support based on these clinical signs. If the retractions are more and they are severe, I would not wait for ABG report. I would give respiratory support, and once the ABG comes, then I will fine tune it. Because I do not want to get my baby exhausted and stop or develop more severe disease. Coming to clinical features. Remember, this picture would come time and again to make you feel that it is not the respiratory system alone. Once you have a baby with respiratory distress, the entire window is in front of you, and you must think about each organ which could give rise to a respiratory problem. And hence, I put this picture again. See, there could be a problem of brain. Brain could be depressed or excited. Both happens in newborn situation. Now coming to the signs which are produced by the airway. And as I discussed earlier, is an obstructive airway. So whenever there's an obstruction in the airways, we all understand from pediatric practice very easily, but same is true for the newborn to a large extent, that when there is a narrowing of the airways or the secretion of the airways, there'll be abnormal sounds. The fundamental is more superior the problem in the airway, the sound would be more of an inspiratory nature. As we go down from inspiratory sound to a combined sound, and if you go to a finer, narrower airways, you will have expiratory sound. So remember, these sounds would be audible. Plus, since there is obstruction, body would try to remove obstruction or compensate to a decreasing resistance by flaring Alli-Nasi. That's a very important sign. And whenever there is an obstruction, the entire air is not going out, and hence you will have a hyperinflation test or maybe a barrel-shaped chest. So these signs itself would tell you, without going to any investigation, well, here I have a baby with meconium aspiration syndrome or some aspiration syndrome or an obstructive disease, and I need to treat accordingly. When we come to restrictive disease, it means the lungs are not inflating, they have their own problem, or the covering layer, pleura, it has some fluid inside, whether blood, liquid, or air. And so here we find the lungs fail to inflate, and therefore the most important clinical sign here would be retraction. And body would try to produce own CPAP by grunting. And of course, tachypnea would be there. So remember, these signs are very important and would minimize delays in your diagnosis and treatment. When it comes to a mixed diagnosis, means both airway and the pulmonary disease, you will have a combination of signs as per the predominant lesion present in the baby. Now I come to the alveolo-capillary membrane. Here you have to see that the perfusion should be taking place well in the pulmonary capillaries, but if it doesn't, then think of pulmonary hypertension, the commonest problem in the newborn, and you would have a corresponding sign of pulmonary hypertension clinically. What you see, the gradient in the saturation in the upper and lower limbs or in the PaO2s, and baby will be highly unstable. Remember that here I have a baby with a background of some aspiration syndrome or some other predisposing conditions which give rise to PPH, and if we have a flip-flop of the saturation, baby is disturbing our diagnosis PPH and until it's proven otherwise. Coming to the blood vessel, I'm still talking of the respiratory system at large. So think that these are all sub-organs of the respiratory physiology. And here in the blood, we will see whether baby is anemic or polycythemic, and they would require your attention. When I look at the systemic circulation, I have to see that all the systemic circulation should be adequate enough to perfuse all organs. And therefore, my clinical signs of perfusion, like capillary refill time, perfusion index, they are exceedingly important and we must pay attention to. Ultimately coming to the target organ, where it is required to do its function. So if each cell is not getting adequate oxygen, means less calories, so would start showing its dysfunction. So across the board, without exception, all organs will have some or other dysfunction coming up, maybe subtle to begin with, and we have to observe and become watchful and say that well, maybe is going to serious respiratory problem at the cellular level. Something is exceedingly fundamental which we may ignore. We must remember, after all, this entire process is to give adequate oxygen to the baby, adequate calories. Now, you may have fundamentally some condition which having more oxygen demand, increased BMR. For example, baby is having fever or having hypothermia or chronic lung disease. Now, if we do not address these conditions, then baby will continue to have a higher oxygen demand, means higher ATP demand, and the entire process has to work for it. Therefore, it is essential that we must look for the signs of these conditions of increased metabolic rate and address them. So therefore, the central message here is that observe clinical features of all the organs. And here I am saying roughly 10 processes are involved and not just lung and airways. We must see baby in totality in relation to the pulmonary issues. Only then we'll make a complete diagnosis. Can I have this? There are some people who are in the waiting room. Can this message be removed? Which it's coming on the screen. 6 people have entered the waiting room. Request organizers, please. Now coming to the investigations after clinical features, again my same window opens, and therefore I would customize my investigation organ-wise. Brain, the most important for the brain is neuroimaging, and the fundamental and the most easy to do in newborn care is neurosonography. And a baby with a respiratory distress can have problem in the brain, and he can have abnormalities of either he breathes faster or he could be apneic if there's a brain disease. And the second investigation which we do often is CSF. There could be many more, but I am talking only essential investigation at the moment. When I come to the commonest lung situation, there's a parenchymal disease, which means hyaline membrane, pneumonias, etc. The investigation should be that X-ray is one of the fundamental investigation. Nowadays, we would like to see how the lungs are behaving on the pulmonary graphics. So it's a good idea to get a hang of pulmonary graphics. It's very easy. It's only apprehension of unknown until we have tried to see it, observe it. We'll find it that it is experimental. No, in today's time, it should be integrated in the decision making. The other important investigation is lung ultrasound. It would really help in a big manner. In fact, today, as we are talking of pulse oximetry, almost the time is coming where the ultrasound probe would become one of our stethoscope for all functions. And lung ultrasound is very simple. It's only a question of a training. If this august organizing body wants, subsequently we can train people on pulmonary graphics and lung ultrasound. The next investigation is that if there is some fluid collection, you have to do paracentesis. in difficult scenarios, we are required to do a tissue diagnosis. Even a newborn, we can do a lung puncture and can take a spirit from there, which could help both in microbiology as well as tissue diagnosis. And of course, last is imaging. More than X-ray, means CT and MR could be done. But when I come to the upper airway problems, here the most important is again X-ray chest, pulmonary graphics, but the important is endoscopy, which means either we do laryngoscopy or bronchoscopy, and they are important. Because these scopies would tell us that where is the obstructive lesion. It could be both diagnostic as well as therapeutic. The general investigation which each case of respiratory disease would require is that how is the milieu interior, or how effective is the outcome of the lung functioning, and that is arterial blood gases or blood gases. They could be compromised from arterial to CBG or VBGs, but blood gases. Serum electrolytes are very important because they would affect all structures. Brain, suppose there's a hyponatremia, it would be depressed. Right. We must do infection workup and metabolic workup in all cases. Of course, depending upon the situation, we will customize that which requires a precedence, but this should be kept in mind. Now I come to the pulmonary circulation, and investigation for pulmonary circulation is eco standard, but we should not forget ECE. It gives a very important clue. When I come to the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, it is a hemoglobin is to be done as a standard practice in cases of all respiratory diseases. When we look at the cellular level, it is a tissue serum lactate, and maybe those who are in a postgraduate or looking for an advanced center, maybe it's a time of NIRS, near infrared spectroscopy, would be the investigation which would get increasingly used the moment it becomes more cost effective. Never forget to do your blood sugar. I remember ventilating a baby in Mumbai. The primary problem was hypoglycemia, but we went ahead with ventilation in one of the hospitals. So remember, blood sugar is exceedingly important, the first investigation to be done. Therefore, the investigation of choice or order would be that we must do X-ray chest. And here the tip is that always we must do X-ray chest with a nasogastric tube in, so that in the first X-ray itself, we have excluded surgical conditions. Do blood gases, including serum lactate, pulmonary graphics, hematocrit, blood glucose and electrolytes, sepsis workup, and other investigations could be customized, need-based. Now, dwelling a little differently now, there's some of the important components which everyone must know who is dealing with the newborns with pulmonology problems. And here I would just talk on oxygen content of blood, as I've emphasized that the oxygen in the blood or oxygen content of the blood is determined by the hemoglobin and the PaO2. And see here, the oxyhemoglobin carries this much and PaO2 carries this much. But all the time we talk of blood gases, means how much is the PaO2. But what we have to understand that hemoglobin carries much larger. If you see the figure which will come, 1.34 into hemoglobin concentration plus into oxygen saturation would be a large number, and this would be less than 1 ml most of the time. And hence, what we would consider is that our patient who's having a respiratory problem, what is his hematocrit, and maybe we would be required to give RBC support or red cell treatment. Some of the conditions which I have highlighted is if there is a persistent lactic acidosis, continued respiratory support demand, or apneas, we must consider hemoglobin therapy or RBC therapy. Now here I am giving an example to exemplify the fact that relative roles of hemoglobin and the PaO2. The example is that the hemoglobin in this baby is 20 gram %, saturation is 100%, and PaO2 is also 100. This is just an arbitrary picture I wanted to give you for a calculation. So if you see the oxygen-based the hemoglobin-based oxygen is 26.8, while PaO2-based oxygen is only 0.3. So out of 27.1 ml, it's only 0.3 ml which is PaO2 or dissolved oxygen. So please remember, hemoglobin should always be looked at. Coming to the second concept of oxygenation index. Now, oxygenation index is one of the parameters which we calculate by a formula where we have FiO2 is multiplied by MAP divided by PO2. What we have to see that in the numerator, it is a FiO2. It is a MAP, means the degree of the respiratory support. And the numerator is the PO2, how much is oxygenation is taking place. It means if higher support is required for a lesser, for getting a lower PO2, it means the condition is very bad. So Basically, oxygenation index would tell us that how good or bad patient is doing. I have given some numbers. If the number is less than 25, it is good. But as the number keeps on increasing, it means it is bad. And if it is more than, say, 30 to 40, it means this patient would not do well and requires a care at the higher center. Therefore, we must counsel such parents and be ready for a transfer where higher facility is available. And therefore, I would request that all NICUs where we ventilate or give respiratory support on a daily routine, we must talk of OIE. We do an SGPGI in our daily rounds. We ask how the OIE is changing, and therefore it gives a holistic view of the lung and heart both together, and we are in a better position to take a decision. Now I shift gear that what one should do and how it affects the various components of respiration, means oxygen and carbon dioxide. So first I'm talking about interventions to improve oxygenation. This is very fundamental. We must understand this. Now, if you have a patient of hypoxia, the first thing one could do is increase the FiO2. A relatively non-invasive, nothing, non-disturbing FiO2. So it means oxygen. And FiO2 means it is controlled oxygen. You are not giving 100%. And then second thing, if the oxygen doesn't improve with this, then you come with CPAP or maybe a DuoPAP. I'll dwell a little later about it. So this is about CPAP. But if you are ventilating, then it is a MAP which decides oxygenation. And MAP is derived by a formula. There are many formulae, but I like this formula because it is very easy for me to make my point. And see in this formula that MAP is equal to PEEP, a separate determinant plus a combination of determinant which includes PIP minus PEEP into TI upon TI plus TE. Now these many things decide the MAP. So remember here that PEEP alone is most important determinant to decide MAP. Rest all, maybe if we have PIP, it would decide, it will increase MAP, TI would increase MAP. And there are two other things which I have written down below, which is flow and respiratory rate. They have some effect, but not to that extent. So if I revise, the most important thing for oxygenation is FiO2, CPAP, after that PEEP, PEEP, followed by PIP, then TI, then flow and respiratory rate, in that order would be their relative efficacy to address MAP. So I'm showing here pictorially pressure time, and MAP is basically the area of the curve, area under the curve is the MAP. Now this is PEEP. If I draw this up, this is the PIP, the upper limit, and where it comes down or it starts downing is the TI period, inspiratory time, and after that the expiratory time. So this area is the area which is under this is MAP. So it is decided by PEEP, PIP, and the TI. Now, if I increase, suppose PEEP to this, there is an increased area, so PEEP would increase MAP. If I increase PIP, again it increases MAP, and if I increase TI, again it increases the MAP. While if I increase the flow, the wave which is sinus here, it becomes more of a rectangular. So again it increases the area, so it might affect MAP to some degree. And if we can also, if increase the rate, maybe per unit time, we'll have a more MAP. So remember, these are the factors which decide improve oxygenation, and this is what fundamental we have to consider in our decision making bedside, that very often, in fact it is a ritual, that our patient is hypoxic, what action we should take. You must remember this graph and take actions in order of their efficacy. Similarly, what are the determinants of CO2 in the body when we are doing mechanical ventilation or ventilation per se or even otherwise? So it's a product, minute ventilation is a product of a tidal volume and a respiratory rate. So these two things decide how much baby is breathing or how much CO2 would be, how effectively the CO2 would be handled. Now here I am just putting a slide to show a relative efficacy between tidal volume and respiratory rate. Try to understand by this example. Firstly, when we put pressure inside, means the volume inside, which is a surrogate, there will be more barotrauma, or if it's a volume, it's a volutrauma. So more trauma it will produce. However, we have to see that when we are giving tidal volume, it is getting distributed into two components. The proximal part would be a dead space, which is not taking part. So it's a dead space ventilation. And the distal component would be alveolar ventilation, which is effective ventilation. So for example, if I give a tidal volume of 4 ml, and suppose the dead space is on 2 ml, and that alveolar space is 2 ml, so it means 2 ml will go into dead space and 2 ml will go to alveolar space. So 50%. Now, if I increase this tidal volume from 4 ml to 6 ml, what happens? The dead space is constant. It's the alveolar ventilation which will increase. So from 2 ml, it will become a 4 ml. So it's a significant jump, right? So it's almost 100% jump in the ventilation. But on the other hand, if I increase the respiratory rate, say from 40 to 45, it doesn't have a 100% change. I have to increase to 40 to 60, only then it would have 50% change. So therefore, a change in tidal volume is more impactful, effective in improving the minute ventilation. Now we come to decision making. Let's see how we go ahead. The commonest situation is hypoxia, which we see all the time. And if there is a hypoxia, we have understood, it will give rise to anaerobic metabolism, which means lesser ATP and lactic acidosis, which will give rise to cellular dysfunction. And hence we have to address it at the earliest. So hypoxia means treatment is oxygen. And here I have written FiO2, not 100%. So we are giving a controlled oxygen. So means one would require a blender. And whenever we connect oxygen, we have to give oxygen to a level, to a desired level of a saturation range. Today, across all gestation and age, we put a saturation limit between 91 to 95%. This should be remembered. Now, these alarm limits have to be kept in mind, and it must be put. The moment you start oxygen, alarm limit set. And then once we come for a round, we should see that, well, during night time, we should look at the trends, whether did he dip? Your nurse might say that he remained all right. But if we look at the trend of 24 hours, 48 hours, we'll be able to we'll come to know that how good or bad the baby is doing. Okay. So oxygen trend, now we call also oxygen histograms. So we should be knowing them and looking at. Now something very important I mentioned here is humidification. This is a term coined by us. So whenever we give oxygen, it should always be across all ages. It should be humidified, and more than humidified, it should be warmidified. So it should be warm and moist. If it has both qualities, it will be not irritating the airways and lungs, and it will do a physiological function. But if we do not do any one of them or both of them, then we are going to produce more irritation in the airways and more problems. The next issue we should consider is there should be appropriate interface, and we should be as non-invasive as possible. So here I would like to state, remember, it is warmidified and FiO2 whenever there is a hypoxia. Though there will be very less situation where just hypoxia alone would be there. There will be problem more than hypoxia, and for that we need to decide our treatment. Now I am building up the case. After coming to first decision, I am building the case that here a baby has hypoxia. Along with this, he has a distress, means retractions. Now oxygen therapy will not control retractions, and retractions are occurring because the lungs are poorly compliant. And for then to inflate, we would require pressure. So the fundamental is whenever there are retractions, you need pressure. So here we will give controlled FiO2 as we have discussed earlier, but you would require pressures. And how much pressure? There should be sufficient pressure when you can clinically see that the retractions have disappeared. That's your clinical titration. And most of the time you would be correct. And how we give pressure? The conventional or the most common is the CPAP. There are a couple of types of CPAP, which we'll learn later in the next other day on the discussion. To me, bubble CPAP is very good. It has various good attributes. And when we look at the interface of the CPAP, it should be non-invasive. And the best is nasal mask. So the bottom line here I would like to convey, if you have a patient who is having distress, retractions, treatment is FiO2, which is humidified, and the pressure. Let's build up the case further. Now this distress is persisting or increasing. Now what does it convey to us? It conveys that a disease is more severe or whatever treatment we are giving is less effective. And therefore, we need to do a couple of basic investigations to come to a decision that, well, what is the problem? And here, what we would do that after diagnosing whatever condition is there, we would build up our treatment. It means it is, if the pressure were not optimal, we will optimize the CPAP, or maybe we might give duopap, or if it is surfactant issue, then we would give a surfactant for sure. We will not delay here surfactant because our things are worsening. So the message here is that we will titrate our therapy and upscale the support. Now this baby might improve. So here we have a hypoxia and the retractions are decreasing or there's an improvement. It means the disease is coming either under control, it's mild, or it is improving. That's our decision. And therefore, we would like to not to give unnecessarily this pressure because it's invasive, it's harmful. So let's start weaning off CPAP. And here one could consider HHFNC, which I did not talk in upscaling. Remember that. Till date, we are not sure about how much pressure it gives HHFNC. And hence, it cannot be a definitive therapy. While patient is improving, then it has a role to play. And then we can give some pharmacological support. Further going up, this patient continues to remain hypoxic despite all this. Now, our dictum in newborn care is when you have exhausted resources of treating hypoxia and baby remains highly fragile, think of PPHN until and unless proven otherwise after having excluded a structural heart disease. And hence, it is PPHN which must be excluded, and the treatment standard would be, depending upon the facility you have, either inhaled nitroxide or pharmacomanipulation. And as I discussed earlier, oxygenation index, it becomes a very important tool, and it would make us understand that how the baby is doing overall. What a difficult hypoxia. It has decided not to settle, despite our exhausting, I know. No, this is a very grave situation. We should not have a pseudo brevity here. We must timely decide that if the oxygenation index keeps on increasing and you have exhausted your ventilatory resources, it is time to send this baby to a center where a higher level care is available. So it's very crucial that we must counsel timely the parents and plan transfer to higher center. Now, so far, I just addressed the situations which were hypoxic situations. Now, since it is a respiration, the CO2 would also create this havoc. So in any patient who is not ventilating well is likely to have hypoxia along with that hypercarbia.
Hello. Hello. So when it is hypercarbia, or patient is having a recurrent apnea, things are worsening. It means disease is more severe. The investigation to be done are again our simple basics, X-ray, chest, EVG, and graphics, but it's the time to breathe for the baby. When hypercarbia means mechanical ventilation. Our principles would be that we should be as non-invasive as possible. So non-invasive is desired, appropriate settings. And whatever we give, we must do a close monitoring after that. And whichever mode, whichever machine, it is your training, it is your equipment, it is your comfort that would decide what you will give. But the bottom line would be that it has to be safe, effective, and customized. Now the hypercarbia is becoming a problem. Now a patient who was doing well, either he becomes suddenly hypercarbic or hypercarbia continues or suddenly worsens. Now all conventional teaching we have, so we will take all those measures. Remember, in addition to looking at machine interface, air leak syndrome, tube position, something which you have to look, which commonly people ignore and do not pay attention, even they do a lot of ventilation. Unnecessary length of the endotracheal tube from the lip beyond, which is of no good. We must cut that dead space to a bare minimum size, which just permits fixation of endotracheal tube easily. That point should be looked at. And even if you learn this today in practice, this will be a huge change for subsequent ventilation days of yours. Chest wall rigidity, other thing. And now when it comes to action, when there is a hypercarbia, we have two actions, either increase the respiratory rate or increase the tidal volume. Now, when we are doing a pressure ventilation, the tidal volume is the surrogate difference between PIP and PAAP. So if we increase PIP, peak inspiratory pressure, then it is likely to give more tidal volume, or reduce PAAP generally. If unless we have a huge degree of alveolar collapse, then a small increase in PEEP might help in washing out CO2, but otherwise it is a gradient between PIP and PAAP. The other thing is that expiratory time. The patient should be given enough breathing out time, then things would improve, and all this could be adequately adjusted by looking at the pulmonary graphics. The next thing which we have to look at is synchronization. Now, never be in a asynchronized mode with anyone. So is the baby, so is the ventilator. And if baby is fighting ventilation, your CO2s would never be normal. So synchronize the ventilation, sit with the baby, sit for long hours, and after adjusting, fine-tuning, you would be able to adjust the settings as per the baby's need. His hypercarbia is likely to settle. And if nothing works, we have exhausted all our resources and you have given enough tidal volumes, then it's a time to go for a high frequency ventilation. All this requires urgent review, action, and upscaling of intervention bedside after analyzing each component. Now, it's a summarizing slide here of principles of respiratory support. So what we have learned so far, that if there is a hypoxia, first thing we give is a FiO2, which is heated and humidified. And whenever we put this, we have to have target saturation. If patient doesn't become all right with this, we go ahead with non-invasive CPAP, means nasal CPAP, maybe duo PAP. And when we are coming down, then we can consider HHFNC. If the patient is severely hypoxic, we must consider PPHN, treat accordingly, and if oxygen index keeps on worsening, it's a time to transfer and do ECMO, consider. When it's a hypercarbia, it's a time that baby needs mechanical ventilation. It's always good to do non-invasive and synchronize. So I put SNIPPV or HFO. Maybe it's a little early in the day as far as we are concerned. We need to have those machines, then we need to have those training. A time would come, not very far away, when we would stop putting endotracheal tubes in the baby, even for resuscitation and ventilation both. It is only in difficult scenarios when would be required. So SNIPPV, and if things are not okay, we go for SIMV or assist control or a higher up. If things are still not okay, HFO. NAVA people have heard. Now I'm introducing another word, which is a NeuroPAP, which is something like NAVA, where we adjust pressures based on the diaphragmatic tone. It's a term which all postgraduates should know, think of future, and would be possible. And sometimes in near future, we might be starting. And liquid ventilation, though it has been done in the past, not much of newborn experience, but again, there is a revised interest in partial liquid ventilation. We should be thinking about it, though it may not become a reality for practice, but certainly worth knowing it. Therefore, friends, the most important part in respiratory support is science, the entire knowledge. But if this knowledge is not supported by bedside sitting for hours, getting those cues from the baby and adjusting them and developing that art and the skill, you would not be doing a successful ventilation. Therefore, ventilation is science, but it is as much art, maybe more art, if you want to do a ventilation with minimum damages to the baby. Monitoring. It is essential that we monitor all organs, as I've just mentioned in the initial slides. We must look at the pulmonary graphics, which it depicts actually what is happening inside lungs. Radiology, blood gases, end-tidal capnography can be done. Hemoglobin, essential, transfiltration, and lung ultrasound. Therefore, remember here, I've been putting the monitoring is clinical and investigative, not investigation alone. Investigation could be fallacious, inaccurate, but your clinical judgment would never be inaccurate. Now, certain caveats, and we work in the principle that we should not harm our baby. Therefore, prevent oxygen-associated injuries, which would occur because of hypoxia and hyperoxia. Prevent pulmonary trauma of any etiology, volume, pressure, atelectasis, biological, etc. Prevent at all costs. Prevent respiratory support associated infection, VAP, very common. We are so aggressive in ventilation, but when you look at the incidence of VEP, it is equally bad. We must prevent VEP at all costs. Don't think just of lungs alone. All other organs need intactness, brain, heart, kidney, etc. And our aim is to save baby intact. So our dictum is, we must not harm by our practices. We only should do good to the baby. So customize and be very sensitive. Counseling, it is extremely crucial. It should be very comprehensive. It must take clinical, administrative, financial, ethical, and any other issues which you feel are relevant, should be done at start, should be done daily, and as and when required. It must be documented, written, as well as the audio-video recording. Now, this is most essential. And who knows better than all pediatrician neonatologists that to be a successful doctor in this domain, the counseling is crucial. We must all hone our skills every day. At any age, we are not yet perfect in counseling or communication. We must keep learning. This is something again very close to my heart, and that's a nutrition and nutraceuticals. We only think at the respiration when you have a baby coming with respiratory distress. Imagine that particular organ, that particular cell, that particular mitochondria needs glucose, other metabolites to produce ATP. But if we do not give that, we put baby in catabolism, do you think each cell would function optimally? Answer is no. Therefore, it is essential that we must plan aggressive nutrition from day one, be it parental, partial parental, or enteral. Though enteral is always best because you are using GIT. Remember that. And here, you require large enough of nutrients for the growth and for the defense mechanism of the airways. The cilia has to function. The epithelium has to remain healthy. And therefore, it is important that it should have vitamin A, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium. Maybe on the last day, we will talk on nutraceuticals, but it is important. Immunity is crucial. And whatever immune enhancing agent we can give to the newborn, we must give. And the best answer is colostrum. There is no debate about it. And hence, we should start colostrum right on day one. If you do even a buccal squaring, it's fine. Stress management. Now, everyone is stressed in the NICU. And remember, when neonate is stressed, he has more asynchrony. His stress has to be reduced. And that is, we should not disturb, we should not give pain, etc. And therefore, we must get developmentally supportive care if you want this baby to remain intact. Now, parents are equally stressed and therefore need to be counseled for sure and most effectively. Doctors are absolutely more stressed. And what saves them is a consent from the parents, electromedical record keeping, and audio-video records keeping. And therefore, I have written at the bottom, it is essential to practice for intactness of all. Even if you want to remain safe, intact, please practice this. Whatever I mentioned here, only then you will remain intact, otherwise somebody might harm you. Now, again, I am coming to my fundamental slide on management. Remember, same template. And my management would involve all organs for respiratory condition. So I would first look at the brain and see whether it has the appropriate drive or not. And to have its appropriate drive, I'll have a normal cerebral milieu. Means adequate glucose, adequate sodium, adequate potassium, and so on and so forth. And my patient must not be on a respiratory depressant. And when it is required, I might give selective brain stimulant when I'm taking out of the ventilation, maybe caffeine then. Always remember diaphragm. Never your patient should be lying flat or maybe abdomen a little up when you're ventilating. Therefore, always keep shoulder a little up, 30 to 40 degrees. So your diaphragm is pushed down and you have a more easy ventilation. What people normally do is that one may not pay attention here and keep increasing pressure. That's wrong. Also, the importance of position. The ventilation is much better if we ventilate our babies in prone position, but it all depends how we are trained, what nurses are, how the system is. But if you have a difficult situation of ventilation, patient is not doing well, always putting shoulder up in prone position, there is a possibility that you will come out from difficulty. Coming to obstructive diseases, the management must include, as I mentioned earlier, warm modified oxygen. Means the cilia, the airways they should not get irritants. They should get supportive facilitatory care. So it's a warmidified oxygen, relieve obstruction. We all know the bronchodilators or anti-inflammatories. However, in newborn practice, we commonly find some structural problem or our procedure related, some stenosis here, some stenosis there, vocal cord problems. So endoscopy is very crucial, and that procedure would be required. And through endoscopy and video laryngoscopes are wonderful, and more of them would come into use in time to come. And still, if patient doesn't do well, then we would think of mechanical ventilation. When we come to a restrictive disease, I have come to the parenchyma, same principles, warmidified retractions means pressure, surfactant. If CO2 retained, we should give minute ventilation or mechanical ventilation. And if there are collections, we would be required to do procedure centricis. Something very fundamental, and that I will pause a bit to make you understand, which we possibly may not give adequate attention, is the weight change every day in the baby. Now, if there is an edema or fluid retention in the baby, all tissues retain water, so is the interstitium of the lung. And if you have a fluid retention in the interstitium of the lung, the gas diffusion would be difficult. Therefore, the standard practice should be that such a baby who is on acute respiratory distress should lose some degree of weight, for at least for initial few days, so that the interstitial edema does not take place or it has been taken care. So dictum is take weight very often, maybe 8 to 12 hours. Of course, very carefully. The tube should not come out, or if he's a case of PPH, then he should not just collapse. But weight record and restrict fluid, of course, we will titrate with the hemodynamic status. Ensure pulmonary circulation. So prescription must include treatment for pulmonary circulation, let's say inhaled INO or pulmonary vasodilator or prostaglandins. We must maintain systemic circulation, and the prescription should include volumes and inotropes or maybe corticosteroids as well. We must maintain hematocrit and hence should monitor and give transfusion if required. Something essential again at the cellular level, we must give adequate energy to ensure hypoeuglycemia, ensure perfusion, ensure oxygenation, and treat sepsis effectively. This particular block is very, 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 very important. And we must always look at it and address it on priority. As I said earlier, see that this patient does not have an oxygen gap because of the increased demand. So reduce his metabolic rate by keeping baby euthymic and prevent those conditions or treat those conditions which have a more demand, means sepsis and BPD. Have an early aggressive nutrition and immunity. Have very important stress management attribute in your management, means developmentally supportive newborn care, counseling, and consent. Therefore, dear friends, this management includes of a respiratory case, addressing respiratory system, other systems, and providing comprehensive respiratory care. And this should address preventing lung injuries, pneumonias, secondary damages to other organs. And this would happen only if we practice REARS, and every time that our prescription doesn't address to all these components. If we practice only, then it would happen. Otherwise, we will do a partial treatment of patient. Therefore, coming to prescription writing during respiratory support, some of those things which I have discussed, I bulleted them here. What type of respiratory support you'll give, interface and specific details. Treatment of primary respiratory disease may be surfactant. You would address to perfusion, hypoglycemia. You maintain your electrolemia, maintain hematocrits, monitor and support other organs, give aggressive early nutrition in form of colostrum, total or partial parenteral nutrition or enteral nutrition, early diagnosis and treatment of complications, developmentally supportive care, counseling, and others. Therefore, see, a prescription has got at least 9 to 10 bullets. In each case of respiratory disease, there could be many more. And if you want to be a successful doctor or neonatologist, have a comprehensive prescription, including 9, what I've shown, or maybe much more bullets, and giving adequate addressing details when it is required. Now coming to billing, some fundamentals. Anything which we give is unnatural, is going to be harmful. Let the nature take its own course and just facilitate nature. So we should be minimally invasive, give intervention of an optimum intensity for optimum duration. Sooner you should come out, lesser you could give. So come out at the earliest ensure the primary disease is getting controlled. There should be enough respiratory drive. I call effector organ means diaphragm and muscles. They should have adequate function and strength, and the VQ should be adequately addressed. Oxygen content of the blood should be fine. Other organs are taken care. Milieu interior means serum electrolytes, blood glucose, chemistry is normal, getting adequate nutrition. And only after considering all this, then one would think of starting weaning. The rapidity of weaning would depend how serious or acute the condition has been. If it's a chronic condition, wean very slowly. If required, do a pharmacofacilitation, some drugs, and maybe counseling. Therefore, this weaning process needs multifactorial consideration so as to ensure that there is no or minimal harm done after attaining desired respiratory facilitation. It should not happen that you have extubated and in the evening again you are intubating or re-intubating. Must not happen. It's a poor planning. Now, friends, I wish and want that all the people who do respiratory care, this window should open in your mind when you have come to attend a baby with respiratory distress. And this is my master slide, and this is just to make you think that you are not looking at the lungs alone. You have to look at the brain, you have to look at the diaphragm, lungs, heart, alveolar-capillary membrane, blood vessels, blood pressure, cell, temperature, glucose. If you have this window open, you will write a perfect prescription. Nothing would be ignored. Now, decision making for respiratory support means it is essential to have aerobic cellular metabolism. That we have to understand. And there's an urgency of facilitatory process. Hypoxia means formaldehyde FiO2. Retractions means pressures plus FiO2. Hypercarbia means mechanical ventilation. And all these things must be customized. And there has to be continuous clinical monitoring facilitated with additional info you get from machines and investigation. Not that your resident is reporting blood gas every night like a parrot. This. But you ask what's happening with chest volume, he doesn't know. No, it's not correct. And so do investigation as it is required. Do a clinical monitoring most importantly. Very unfortunately, I'd like to state that in one of the hospital, my resident ventilated. Of course, I'm accountable for that for 4 hours. After that, when I went there, I found baby in rigor mortis. I said, what's happening? He said, there is a saturation monitor is giving some reading. So I kept ventilating. So that is how your equipment can be faulty. Follow your clinical signs and use them most judiciously and effectively. When we come to respiratory support intervention, remember this is non-physiological. It is to be given as long as it is required to be given without giving any harm to the baby for the lungs or overall. And therefore, I again repeat, learn and practice both science and art of respiratory support. Art is more important because it comes from your commitment. Science you can read anywhere. And you do not become good unless you do good. And for doing good, you have to be with the baby and for the sufficient period of time to learn that skill and art. Now, how to get guided? The first thing is that whatever you practice is your guiding force. At times you are in difficulty, then you ask your seniors. So learn from others' experience on site, whosoever is there. And nowadays, everyone talks of published evidence, systematic reviews, clinical practice guidelines. Of course, they are important. But ultimate guide is a patient. Forget everything else. Patient would tell you that what he needs and do that. And again, follow the second principle, then nothing can beat nature. Follow the nature principles. For living, for nutrition that is made, must be used at the earliest, not TPN, not IV fluids. I've just given one example. So follow these principles. And if you follow these principles in difficult situation, go back to the patient, follow the what nature would like to do, keep these fundamentals in mind, and then you customize the decision. Most often than not, you will be correct. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, clinical indicators are the most important decision facilitators. We must remember that. We need early and appropriate support for respiration. Non-invasiveness is the mantra for today and should always be. With the passage of time, we will become increasingly non-aggressive, non-invasive. Customize, be gentle, maybe has responses. He has his reactions. We should be sensitive to them. Pick up those clues and appropriately respond with gentleness. Both of you will succeed. Withdraw the support at the earliest Rather than 1 day longer, it could be half a day shorter, of course, with due deliberation. Prevent support-related harm means no traumas of any nature, barrow, volute, whatever, or infection. Our aim is not lung salvage, our aim is the intact salvage of the entire body. It's not that the best of the machine, the costliest machine is the best. It's not that you have a Mercedes only, then you will reach a destination. Whatever car you have, whatever machine you have, you must know it well, drive it well. So whatever machine you have on which you are trained is the best machine. It is not the costliest and not the most advanced one. You will succeed. Innovation should be our forte. It's a corona time. Everyone, demand, supply issues, this issue, that issue. And everyone is producing his own, in his own way, humble way, masks, PPEs. We have produced a CPAP machine where one CPAP could be used for 2 patients, 3 patients, 4 patients. Innovate is the need of it is a reflective of our genius. And if we reflect our genius, we'll be the happiest people, because the world will know that this is creation of yours, not somebody else's creation you are talking and preaching. So we all must innovate. And last here is that have a collaborative approach. Nobody is perfect. We all learn from each other. I would be learning tremendously today or entire next 6 to 7 days. So we learn from each other. No hesitations. Use facility. The time of telemedicine, as we are doing today, tele-teaching. And since all of us have a common goal of saving a neonate or a patient, so let's not hesitate, collaborate in asking or supporting each other. Successful ventilation needs more than just science. I repeat time and again. I would like that we all should be great clinicians. We all remember our teachers when they just entered the room without even touching the patient, just by seeing the patient, they gave the diagnosis. That is art. And that is what we should hone. Not like a computer. The time is coming of artificial intelligence. When every diagnosis would be given by computer, you are not required. But still, it cannot do that. Ultimately, you understand the clues of the baby or cues of the baby. And you would be responding most efficiently, which no computer, no science, and has developed that sense. What could be done? Now, some suggestions could be done at the level 2. We must ensure intact survival, develop facilities to give appropriate respiratory support, provide CPAP, level 2 I'm talking, because UP desperately needs respiratory support and CPAP should be our forte. And use just pulse oximetry, multiparameter monitors, X-ray chest, cold light, EBG only as on required basis, titrate clinically. We must develop our neurotransport so that we do a timely in and out transport. Teleconsultation with local unit or level 3 unit would do a great backup. We should be using telemedicine most efficiently with our level 3 units or medical colleges or maybe institute. And counseling and signature of parents would save at all levels. It is no exception to level 2. Therefore, my last few slides, almost I'm concluding. I'm taking from the migrant laborer's journey. Now, if the laborer has to come in today's time, from Mumbai to Lucknow, or has to go to Basti, now what people are doing, the course number 1, the blue one, and here the thickness shows the degree of difficulties that set of people would have. Now, one is that he walks on feet, and then God only knows when he reaches Lucknow, but he has started moving. So that could be one thing. The second is that he starts moving, and then after some time he gets some support off and on, but he is, in that case, he reaches his destination, but it may be he undergoes a rough journey. Third is that he walks some distance and then he gets the organized support. So he reaches destination with a lesser time and lesser discomfort. And lastly, when government gets involved, he's picked up from home and comes to his hometown in a totally supported way, maybe a government transport, maybe rail. So these are the 4 options which we are seeing today, and we are finding different degrees of comfort or efficiencies and success to the laborer. Now, I gave this example to give you a respiratory support. It is no different. My blue is it's a journey path of respiratory support. Level 1, you have a baby in your setup, primary care or in the clinic, we are giving some antibiotics, oxygen, and God only knows what is happening. So that's a level 1. God only knows what disposal will have. Second thing is that we have a level 2 units. Now here, I would like that they should be having appropriate FiO2 and nasal bubble CPAP, which could be innovative local CPAP and for sure, these babies, which is a large chunk and larger areas would be possibly using this, but this will ensure the baby reaches the right destination and does well. In a little higher level of units, there should be a more appropriate CPAP, maybe a good CPAP, and should have a facility of basic mechanical ventilation. And these two steps, number 2 and number 3, will see the UP neonates through, or maybe most of the neonates in India through, who are case of respiratory distress. In some of the centers, level 3B or 4 units, they should have advanced modes of ventilation and everything else. Of course, it would be very effective with minimum discomfort, but then it has a lot of cost involved directly for the machine and infrastructure creation. But remember, in all these cases, 2, 3, 4, the patient is reaching the outcome. So one should not be worried that if he has a CPAP, he can't do well. No, he can definitely do well as long as you do give it and sit with the baby, customize, tailor-made, and you will be surely successful. However, of course, the quality of the care would depend on whatever infrastructure is available and how well one is trained. So my phrase here is, it is the man behind the ventilation or respiratory support that decides the outcome, not the machine which you have. With this, I conclude, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a vow today that we shall give appropriate and timely respiratory support to each needy neonate. Thank you all. It has been wonderful talking to 262 delegates, possibly for the first time in my life. In fact, I used to feel very frustrated whenever I have given a talk in a national conference, whatever level it is. You prepare a talk very well, but once you go to the hall, you find only few people sitting there. So that's a very participant, unique thing for my life. I'm very grateful to each one of you for giving me time and opportunity. Thank you very
much. Thank you, sir. Can you stop sharing now?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank your very systematic approach, your elaboration, algorithm, a mathematical approach, what to do with hypoxia with increased work of breathing, then am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So we have few questions from participants, but before going to that question, sir, in a small town, this is a scenario. A 1 kg or 1200 gram babies, he's 6-7 hour old, hypothermic, hypotonic. What people usually do, intubate and shift this baby on mechanical ventilation. So in fact, from going bottom to top, our journey proceeds from top to bottom, then titrate, decrease FiO2, wait for clinical condition, extubate, and keep the baby on free flow oxygen. So your comment on this situation and what practically people are doing?
As I mentioned, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
As I mentioned in my, in the last slide, my second arrow was saying that whatever you have, you must use it most optimally. The fundamental in neonatology are prevent hypothermia. If you prevent aggressively and treat aggressively, his respiratory distress would reduce, number 1. Number 2, prevent hypoglycemia. So give him glucose. I give you example even of Mumbai. A patient of hypoglycemia missed and be ventilated. So basic of neonatology, prevent hypoglycemia, prevent hypothermia, start that, and if baby needs oxygen, give humidified oxygen, and then give nasal CPAP. Not be in a great hurry to just send the baby out, stabilize the baby. And once you stabilize, maybe things would become much better. And in the meantime, talk to the people who are involved in care, the different tire system, and then arrange the transport in an appropriate manner. But if you just put the tube in, you are sure to damage this baby. You have finished with your responsibility. Unfortunately, you feel so. In fact, you have harmed that baby. It must not be done that way.
second question is, sir, important indication for putting endotracheal tube and mechanical ventilation is hypercarbia. And on the other hand, blood in most of the places, blood gases takes some time, and you also told us to use blood gases judiciously. So at what condition one should think for hypercarbia and go for blood gases?
Firstly, the clinical decision. You have an input available of the baby's clinical condition. You have the clinical signs available. Now you would come to know whether it's a restrictive disease or obstructive disease. For example, if I have a case of meconium aspiration syndrome, I have aspiration syndrome, I'm likely to have problem with CO2s. But if it is just a baby is having pneumonia, some retractions, there is a possibility that he is just hypoxic. And hence my treatment would be hypoxia first. But if you feel that your baby is deteriorating on that, though in adult we have in a grown-up we have a clear signs of hypercarbic problems, but in neonate we may not have a very distinct sign of it. My point would be, if your baby is deteriorating with the initial hypoxic or support of oxygen, then it's the time that you should build up your mechanical respiratory support in terms of a mechanical ventilation. Thirdly, coming on blood gases. Now, blood gases means any blood gas in the initial stage of life. If you have a CO2s which are more than 50 plus, it's definitely a hypercarbia, and you need to address this. However, there could be a condition when patient is hypoxic, he is still retracting. There may not be hypercarbia. Now, this baby is sure to develop respiratory problem. So even in the absence of hypercarbia, but increasing retraction and deterioration, even this would become an indication for mechanical ventilation. So don't go to the numbers, go to the patient's condition. And how does he respond to your step of treatment would decide the treatment for starting mechanical ventilation.
Hyperoxia is important to avoid. And most of the NICUs in a small city does not have blenders. And each and every baby got approximately 100% oxygen. So, sir, your message, your comment for buying or placing blenders to provide fractioned oxygen in NICUs?
It is 100% required. We are doing a criminal neglect. We have a free oxygen radical disease starting from brain to all parts of the body we are damaging, making baby blind. Therefore, we cannot afford to have any hyperoxia at all. There is a necessity to have blenders. One should buy blender, or otherwise there are simpler techniques. If you are giving, say, oxygen by oxygen hood. Now, when you give by oxygen, you can always titrate FiO2 by the number of ports are which being opened. Okay, so one could use that, or theoretically one can use Venturi masks. But again, in practice, we do not have much of Venturi mask available and their uses. But the bottom line would be that until it's a desperate situation to save life, do not give 100% oxygen. Give titrated oxygen and bring your calculation of blenders in place.
So there is a need to change our mindset at every level to use blenders. It is
essential.
So this is a question from Dr. Amit. Please elaborate some more about pulmonary graphics.
We'll have a separate class for pulmonary graphics. Give me one full session. We will talk.
And question from Dr. Sham. How much should be warmified temperature?
Okay. Very fundamental. See, don't go to the numbers. Think what the body needs, what temperature body needs. We would like air to go at that temperature. However, once we take the air is cold. It goes to the nose. And when it goes to the nose does warming. The mucosa does warming. So any temperature which is between 37 to 38.5 or 39 is good. Degrees Celsius.
Dr. Yogesh from Hapur. Role of caffeine in severe hypoxia.
Caffeine per se does not have a role in hypoxia, though it has some brain protection role, so one could use it. But also one must remember that it increases the brain energy consumption. So it is a double-edged weapon, so not as a standard practice.
This is a question from Dr. Yusuf. PPHN is a condition very difficult to manage. Most of the places echocardio or functional echocardiography is not available. Some clues or clinical sign to catch PPHN?
Absolutely, very good question. Very nice question. A baby who was stable becomes unstable, and what we say that he's very labile. The moment you touch, he dips. The moment somebody talks loud, he dips. It means he is in a very unstable condition. His saturations, which were remaining normal earlier, they are not remaining normal now. When you look at the baby's color, it is deteriorating. And then you look at the saturation, the right upper limb and the lower limb, and see what is the gradient. And if you find this, then you feel this baby is a case of PPHN. I'm talking of practical thing. And until unless proven otherwise, even in the absence of echocardiography ECG, this patient should be treated on the lines of PPHN in the practical way, in the practical setting. If you have the facility, bring up your echo confirmation of the diagnosis.
Dr. Vinay asked about role of sedation. This we are going to cover in care of a ventilated baby.
Yes.
Anchors, Dr. Pyali, Dr. Sanjeev, your questions.
Yeah, there are.
Okay. So, sir, Dr. Vinay has asked a question. What is a more important factor to increase oxygenation in a ventilated baby? Is it FiO2 or MAP?
In fact, this is one of the quiz questions. He wants to have an answer from me. I'll give it. A smart way of handling it. Friend, if you see when I mentioned about how to manage hypoxia, the first intervention is to give FiO2, which is relatively safe. And after you exhaust your FiO2, then if you are giving CPAP, then the CPAP. If you are not giving CPAP, patient is on MAP. Now, then you take various intervention, and I repeat, for MAP, increasing MAP, PAAP is most important, followed by PIP, then TI, then flow and respiratory rate in this order. However, remember that FiO2 is relatively less injurious, relatively, while MAP is you are giving pressure. Though none of them is absolutely safe. Better is try to give a small FiO2 first, see things are all right. If not, then give pressure. Otherwise, try to manage with small FiO2, maybe up to 40%.
Right, sir. So another question coming in from Dr. Shikhar. If a baby with distress is on CPAP or other mode of ventilation, could we give him cholesterol from day one?
100%, no doubt. Absolutely, yes.
Sir, then one question from my side. What is the distress of level or the respiratory rate at which we will prohibit giving anything per oral?
Madam is lying this. A tachypnea per se is not a contraindication for an enteral feeding. That's the opening statement. These are two different systems. Unless there is a poor gut perfusion. Okay, that's the second statement. The third statement is the initial stimulation of the entire alimentary system should be done, where you may not give the entire day's requirement as enteral feed, but give some notional. So we say that even in a case when we have a ELBW, 400 gram or 500 gram or 600 gram, even that baby should be given a colostrum application in the mucosa, right? So I would not give you the cutoff of numbers, but I'll give you that some token feed should be started immediately. The only thing is when you have a higher rate, you are worried about aspirations.
Yes.
So take care of those things. And you have heard that in my presentation, I said that shoulder must be kept elevated 40 degrees or so. So then the aspiration would be much lower. However, if you feel your baby is absolutely breathing at a rate of 120 and 130, you're a very worried person, then don't take charge. But otherwise, give some notional feed, and 100% colostrum must be given as an initial feed on day one itself.
Right, sir.
So
Thank
one
you.
question
Dr.
asked
Sanjeev?
by Dr. Yeah, one question asked by Dr. Rohit is, how do you warm oxygen when one is giving through nasal bronchs or head bronchs? What equipments are available besides wall mount humidifiers or flow?
It's a brilliant question. See, A common sense says, or what people practiced earlier, when people used to use Wolf's bottle, that they used to put warm water in that. You now see that when the gas passes through warm water, it gets cooled immediately. So it doesn't work. So the only way of working is to have humidifiers. Humidifier has got both humidification as well as warmidification. Now, you need not to have a high-end humidifier, which is costing you even a lakh. You can have a standalone humidifier, which might cost 10 to 15,000 rupees. So we should, all units must have standalone humidifiers, which should not be part of ventilator and should be used for each patient who receives oxygen without fail.
And one more question: how to know interstitial edema once it has taken place, despite fluid restriction? Should we restrict fluid further? Asked by Dr. Ravi.
It's a brilliant question. Now I'm giving you some clinical tip and art of neonatology. In fact, though it's not written in the books, but what we follow in our practice is that we even look at the posterior chest wall. You pinch the posterior chest wall. If you find there is edema present even there, we say that it is a surrogate or that there is the edema inside it as well. It means when we are taking weight, a patient who is not getting adequate calories, he has got no business to gain weight. And when patient is sick, I am sure he would not be getting adequate calories to make him gain weight. So the point is this, that whatever weight gain has occurred, it is because of the retention of fluid. So this is the opening statement. The strategies. The strategies would be, in that case, first is slowly and surely reduce fluid intake, IV fluids, okay? Maybe you chart fluid every 6 hourly or 8 hourly. When we reduce fluid intake, we are always worried about hypoglycemia or dyselectrolemia. So monitor for that. Keep patient euglycemic, euelectrolemic with fluid restriction. Now, if still fluid patient continues to gain edema, it means you have to put forced diuresis. You have to put a small amount of diuretic, Lasix to this baby, maybe on 12 hourly frequency, not for long. And this will give a sufficient time to get the body physiology in place, and you will come out from this. However, one should exclude the secondary causes of CHF, like for example, PDA could be a common association. So exclude that.
There is one more question from my side.
Oh, welcome, sir.
Many times this pulse oximeter doesn't pick oxygen. So there is any specification for oximeter to be used in NICUs?
Okay. It's a brilliant question, again, very close to my heart. See what happens. The pulse oximeter work on the principle of picking up pulsations in that particular part of the body where we applied the probe. Now, what happens when we apply the probe? There is a certain degree of pressure which is exerted. And if the baby is sick, perfusions are poor, it fails to pick up the parameters. So it becomes ineffective. The first thing is that we should not put undue pressure and we should keep rotating them. That's the second. Third is that the Masimo technology is very good. So we should take pulse oximeter which are of Masimo company, work on Masimo principle. Their sensitivities are much better. Lastly, I like to share with my own innovation in this field. And that is we have developed for the pulse oximeter, the same pulse oximeter machine, we have developed a strap which can come on the baby's head. The sensors are put on the baby's head. It works on the principle of reflective pulse oximetry, the same pulse oximeter machine. No other sensor is being brought. The same finger sensor can be put on the head, and there the chances of picking it would be much better, and it would be fairly effective. We have tried it adequately.
One question from Dr. Arvind. With every medico-legal angle keeping in mind, how frequently we should go for arterial blood gases?
Oh. See, you are a great clinician. If you are a great clinician, it means you do a thorough examination. And if you do a thorough examination, you do a great documentation. Now, doctor is not duty bound to do investigation for the sake of just for medical legal. Now, whatever you document and justify your action, you are correct. And therefore, one should bring subjectivity and objectivity in a balanced manner. If you feel the condition is really bad, maybe one odd you can do for the sake of documentation, but not that since there is a risk of medical legal, you keep taking baby every 3 hours and 4 hours. Just now, you are damaging a baby. So what my statement would be, write documents in great detail, put your clinical findings, put your saturation monitoring, and describe the baby's condition, and then you do maybe once in a while, maybe once in a day. If you're more worried, maybe twice a day or maybe SOS, but not every 4 hours or 6 hours because you're worried of medical legal. But document decision making.
So now I think it's 10:20 and most of the questions are over. Now over to Dr. Pyali for concluding remarks, then Vinay to some housekeeping or further announcements.
Thank you.
Pyali, madam, please.
Further questions can be put in the WhatsApp group.
ठीक है So, thank you, Girish sir. I will thank you very much for making such a lucid presentation. And last but not the least, I must thank the participants who have had the perseverance of sitting through all of this. And one more thank you to our moderator, Dr. Vineet, and both our anchors, including myself, of course. Of course, the last thank you goes to DREV for supporting us, and long live UPIAP. So the next, tomorrow's deliberations now, as per charter, as Sanjeev has already said. So we start sharp at 8:30 tomorrow again. Vinay, will you do the concluding remark?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Girish, for an amazing presentation. Dr. Vineet, thank you so much. Dr. Pyali, Dr. Sanjeev, Dr. Shalabh, everyone. I think we had a great session today. Thanks every participant for responding to the quiz. Please do the same thing in all the sessions. It will help us to understand what kind of impact we are having in terms of making the presentation, and we will. And the faculty will be able to know, how it is actually impacting. The other point I want to make is that today we did not remove some of the names who were logged in from their name of the mobile phones, just so that, this is the first session and I don't want to be a little strict. But from tomorrow, definitely we will remove people who are not changing their name from their phone names to their first name and the unique ID. It is very, very important. Please do understand, and please kindly consider this is a personal request from me and UPIAP. Thank you, everyone. We will again meet tomorrow at 8:30. Thanks, everyone. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, and giving me opportunity. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you very much.